Tender Strands by Martin Dempsey. Chapter 29. Cuticle. Carly scrunched the white and pink sand between her toes, marveling at how real it felt. The glass-clear water of the sea rolled up and softly folded over and rippled out to gloss her feet, and sparkled with the sun's light. Fresh salt and ozone flicked over her tongue as she breathed in deep lungfuls of air free from the city's acrid tang. On the horizon, her eyes occasionally rested on tiny distant billowing white sails which seemed to be pursued by billowing clouds. Driftwood dotted the beach of the cove, and despite only wearing her sleeping shift, she felt perfectly warm. The high cliff, slate-grey flint and twinkling granite shot through with ripples of chalk white, which could have been oppressive and intimidating, seemed rather to encircle the cove, adding protection and definition. As she turned her head to take in the vistas and scenery surrounding her, it was easy to misplace which crack in the natural wall she had stepped through after a long ascent up the worn stone steps, as the cliff face had so many jagged, fang-shaped holes and nooks worn into it from the tide. As the beach curled around ahead of her, she could make out a sliver of smoke curling upwards, and the slight, dancing light of a fire. Inside, her curiosity met with her eagerness to see and experience more of this new land, and she started to stride confidently towards it. Along the way she stopped several times to admire and explore the flotsam and jetsam, little patches of luminous seaweed which seemed to shrink from her as she drew near, the ragged halves of long empty crab shells bearing clear tooth marks, glass bottles with ships of rolled-up paper inside them, the occasional coin with irregular sides, and heads stamped on them bearing exotic and animalistic features. It was twilight by the time she was near enough to make out the source of the smoke. She could also start to smell and taste. It smelt like beechwood, cannabis, tannis root, hebinum, and lao, the last three scents, ones she'd become increasingly familiar with over the last few months. Her curiosity was gently piqued even further. It was a base campfire, larger than she first expected but well controlled, and as she sidestepped one of the many odd manhole-sized circular sand formations which surrounded it, she saw it was contained by a circle of large white oval beach stones. Near it, there was a collection of driftwood branches assembled between four large boulders, and as she approached, her eyes made sense of the tangled branches as an attempt to weave together four seats out of twigs and grasses on a frame akin to the wicker seats she'd had on her balcony. A crudely attempted box was at the rear of the arrangement, the lid open. Some had been reshaped to represent a hoop, which rested on two branches stuck in the sand. She kept walking nearer, her curiosity far greater than any nervousness about who had built and tended the fire. As she rounded the curve of the flame, her renewed line of sight revealed a man sitting cross-legged on the other side of the fire. His hands rested on his knees, and his topless, slender, thin torso flexed and undulated, revealing the deep, controlled yogic breaths he was taking. The smoke, intermittently old-timey motion picture grey, pearl white and charcoal black, was visibly being pulled into his nostrils and out of his mouth. His eyes were closed behind a pair of out-of-place plastic-framed glasses. Black hair, tied back and up in a bun, smooth features with high but unpronounced cheekbones and a neat, almost snub nose. Large scars were present on both of his upper arms. Not the clear, thin scars of a self-cutter, but the ragged, snarled-up tissue of a burn or tear. Carly stopped and stood for a few moments watching him, unsure of what to say or if she should say anything. She brushed a curl of her auburn hair out of her face and noticed how the thick smoke was starting to make her feel a little giddy, that her tongue felt a little larger in her mouth, that the light of the flame seemed a little brighter, and that the sound of the ocean's lapping was a little more resonant. Hello? Hi? Carly reasoned that this was her dream, and she could choose how friendly the stranger was. He was attractive, too, in a thin, nerdy, cosmopolitan yoga stoner meets castaway kind of way. His eyes flickered open, and his hands drew up his legs to his thighs. His face didn't reveal surprise at being spoken to, but did register confusion. Hey, I hope you don't mind. I was just admiring your wooden benches, are they? The man's face looked stoned and somewhat out of it, but there was something under his confusion and the malaise. Something in his eyes, crawled up to the surface, something urgent and petrified. Carly attempted to calm him, set him at ease. Maybe he thought she was a threat. It's okay. I'm Carly, she said, her accent broadening out the R as it always did when she was trying to initiate a conversation. The man's mouth opened wordlessly, and he seemed to be making shapes. Clacking sounds. Was he clacking at her? His head was shaking now, small movements at first, but getting more and more pronounced. No, he wasn't clacking. That was coming from somewhere else. Spoons being slapped together, maybe? Sand was also shifting near her, she noticed. She could feel the ground shifting under her feet. Someone was chuckling, deeply. With her eyes adapting to the light of the fire, the rest of the world seemed doubly dark, and broad nothingness seemed to stretch out indefinitely around the pool of light which once seemed to offer safety. The man was rising to a stand, his mouth still opening and closing, a word trying to force its way out. As the several compressed lids of sand and webbing were flipped back, and the pitter-patter of tarsal claws on sand joined in the cackling and giggling, the man's mouth finally gave birth to a word that seemed to have been stuck, lodged, suppressed, banned, denied, but which now needed to be said, yelled, screamed with life or death urgency. Spiders!